Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Film Seizure. It's a strange world, isn't it? Today, this week, we have for you 1986's David Lynch's masterpiece, I would say, Blue Velvet. I'm Jason Oliver.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I am Jeff Arbuckle. You are listening to a episode that is being recorded online because of continued efforts for us to quarantine and stay safe and stuff. So we are recording this time on Zoom.
Yeah.
So if there's any weirdness with audio or anything like that, it's because. So.
Nice plug for Zoom there.
Yeah.
Wonderful get a sponsorship.
Well, I mean, I've been plugging Skype. That's why we changed, because
they didn't give a shit.
They didn't give us any fucking checks.
So. Yeah, it's been a long time since you guys have asked for money on the show. So. It used to be beer. You guys wanted money from the beer companies. Sorry, Blue Velvet.
Then we started talking about artsy fartsy movies like Blue Velvet. So.
Now we're talking about Blue Velvet.
Yep.
So all right. There's so much to say about Blue Velvet for me, but and I have a lot of it that I will say. I will say, and this needs to be known up front if our listeners don't know, and that is I'm a very, very, very big David Lynch fan. Yes, that just needs to be known. This is not my favorite David Lynch movie, however, but I do think that it is the movie that best reflects David's work across the type of films he makes. And to preface that, you sort of have different types of movies that David generally makes. You have movies with more of a straight narrative. I would say those examples would be Elephant Man, to some degree Wild at Heart, definitely The Straight Story. So much so that he gave it a meta title. Then you have sort of his more surreal work and his more dream logic work, which is Eraserhead, which is his debut feature-length film. And then you have Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire. But Blue Velvet kind of skirts the line between the two. Blue Velvet is definitely David Lynch at his surrealist best, but is also a conventional story narrative being played out here. So that's why I think it's kind of a good entry-level Lynch, because you get exposed to a lot of what he does as a filmmaker. So that's why I picked it.
So this, you would say, is something like his Rubber Soul or Revolver. If we're talking about the Beatles, it's still kind of straight, but also introducing those weird
I think so. I think it's sort of like the key to understanding his creativity.
Fair.
Yeah. And I think it's the movie in a lot of ways that he was most comfortable making, because it was a complete reaction to his experience on Dune, which we'll need to unpack quite a bit. But yes, so I picked it. Obviously, I don't know. Had you either of you seen this movie before?
No, I had not. I've always known about it. I've always known that Dennis Hopper was a complete and total maniac in it, but I had never seen it before.
Yeah, his character is kind of iconic that way. This movie very much exists in the zeitgeist of all of Lynch's work, probably more so this than any. Because, and in a lot of ways, because of the psychosexuality aspect of the film, the reactions that it had across audiences, and then of course Dennis Hopper's performance as Frank Booth, probably more deserving of the Oscar than his performance in Hoosiers, but nobody was going to nominate anyone for being Frank Booth.
To answer your question, I have seen this film, but as you hear me say often on this show, it's been many years. I have a feeling This was in either the mid 90s or early 2000s that I saw this. And to mention, as you had mentioned, you're a huge Lynch fan. I am not, or haven't historically been a huge Lynch fan. Twin Peaks, watching it late in life, kind of turned me around on that a little. So there's a lot I appreciate with David Lynch now, but there's also a lot that I'm just like, oh, give me a break. But that didn't stop me from enjoying this film, even though there were parts where I was like, oh, whatever this is, I'm just going to get past it and then watch the next scene.
Yeah, I got some things to say about that too, but I agree with you, Chuck. I am not somebody who will clamor to watch a David Lynch anything. But I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure what of his stuff I actually have seen. I feel like I watched Lost Highway.
Mulholland Drive, maybe?
No, I've not seen that. I've seen Dune. Yeah. Boy, have I seen that movie. I've seen Eraserhead. But I'm not sure I've seen any of his other stuff. I want to say that my dad at least watched some of Twin Peaks because I remember that being on the TV when I was a kid. That came out, 88, 89, something like that?
Which one?
Twin Peaks. The show.
Yeah. Early 90s, like 91.
Oh, early 90s. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So, I was still, like a teenager. But I kind of remember it being on TV. It may have just been something that Dad watched a couple of episodes of out of curiosity. But, no, I am... I cannot say I'm a Lynch fan. But that's not to say that I dislike him. It's just not my general cup of tea just because it's so... it's very I appreciate the straightforward type of stuff much more. Oh, I've seen The Elephant Man. I have seen The Elephant Man. So I really like that movie. But
that's a very good movie.
But it's not but that's very straightforward story. It's even Dune, for all of its kookiness, there is a sort of straightforward plot, I guess.
So let's bring up Dune, and let's get Dune out of the way because Dune is important to Blue Velvet because without Dune there may not be Blue Velvet.
Well, without Dune he would have done Return of the Jedi. So
that's possible. Yeah.
And imagine what that shit would have been.
So
like.
Dune is an example of a film that does not fit the artist's sensibilities. Dune, I think, was David not quite understanding what type of filmmaker he was going to be yet. He took that job because it obviously was a huge opportunity. Dino De Laurentiis was the producer, probably one of the biggest producer in the world at the time. And it was a huge opportunity, and it was a payday, quite frankly, because
it was a huge budget too.
Lynch had not made a lot of money from his art up until this point. He did okay with Elephant Man. I mean, he didn't make any money on Eraserhead, at least not initially. So yeah, this was a big opportunity for someone who you could very well describe as a starving artist, right? Dune. So, and he liked the book, but that book is a monster. It's long been called unadaptable. It's now in its third adaptation. Which should have come out this year. We'll see if we'll get to see it from Villeneuve's Dune. But yeah, it was a disaster because he obviously didn't have Final Cut. You don't have Final Cut on a big movie like that. He wanted Final Cut. There was just too much story to put into a 2-hour movie. It really needed to be longer. It really needed to be split up. So he was frustrated with all of the things that went with that. And quite frankly, it just wasn't the type of movie that David Lynch should have been making. And Dino De Laurentiis just meddled to the point where, David Lynch doesn't talk about Dune. He's just like, it was a miserable experience. I'll never make a movie like that again. And I'll never make another movie again without Final Cut. and that's very important. So David Lynch learned a lot of lessons by making Dune. What I love the most about his relationship with Dino De Laurentiis is he doesn't blame Dino De Laurentiis for his experience on Dune. He understands the business side of making a movie like that, of making any movie. He has actually a really good relationship, or did have a really good relationship with Dino De Laurentiis, which is how he got Blue Velvet made. I think in some ways Dino even felt bad for how the whole Dune experience went for David. And he actually asked him, what would you like to do next? And David said, well, I have this thing called Blue Velvet, and I want to make this, but I want Final Cut. And Dino, being a businessman first, said, that's fine. You can have Final Cut, but cut your fee in half and cut the budget in half, and you get Final Cut. David Lynch said, fine. There was a little bit of a rights issues because he had tried to sell this picture to another studio before. Dino worked that out. He bought the rights back for David, and he funded probably 95% of the movie. So for all of the anguish that Lynch had and the meddling that Dino De Laurentiis had on Dune, they were still friends, coming out of that, which is kind of a refreshing thing. You don't see that much in Hollywood anymore. And Dino really went to bat for David on Blue Velvet. When the movie was finally made, and there was an original cut of about 4 hours that Dwayne Dunham, a longtime Lynch editor, this is the first time he worked with Dwayne, and Dwayne has said that it actually worked at 4 hours, but Lynch was like, no, obviously we have to cut it. We have to cut half of this movie. And they did, and they cut it down to 2 hours, and then they showed it to Dino De Laurentiis and a few other executives, and Dino was just like, well, no one's going to distribute this, so I'm going to have to set up my own distribution company to distribute this movie. And he did. He paid for all the distribution and set up a company specifically to put this movie out.
And that's the DEG, right? Is that the distribution company he came up with? I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because every time I see that, I think I'm about to watch Transformers the movie, and then Transformers the movie doesn't start, and I'm like, oh, all right, well, what else you got? Dino De Laurentiis did produce my favorite version of King Kong, too.
Oh, yeah.
1976. So
something other interesting about this is Dino De Laurentiis was in the process of setting up his production studio and offices in Wilmington, North Carolina. He brought Hollywood filmmaking to North Carolina in the mid-'80s, and this was really kind of the first film that was shot in Wilmington. And that was important. That was an important cost-cutting measure because they could use these sets that Dino had set up. They could shoot in Wilmington. They used local talent for a lot of the crew, right? So that was a really, really big part of kind of cutting the budget down. It was originally, I think, written as an $8 million budget. It was cut down to $4 million.
One thing about that North Carolina, did I read it right that Lumberton is a real town? And
yes, yes, there are actually lots of Lumbertons, Lumbertons, but there just happened to be one, not too far from North Carolina that they used for logos and police logos and things like that. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I knew that because they had said something about like there was a map shown someplace and that it was a map of it was in the police station. That it was a map of Wilmington, not of the actual Lumberton, because the Lumberton is like Wilmington is like on the shore, and Lumberton's like 90 minutes in or something like that, like 90 minutes west or something like that. So yeah, no, it was because I was like, well, I don't want to ever go there. Ever. I don't want to get beaten up by an insano. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and get this right out. I do like this movie. I had a pretty hard time watching it, though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I had an easier time watching Cannibal Holocaust when I do this movie.
Interesting.
That is interesting, and I think there's something to unpack there.
as good as Dennis Hopper is in this, I had to turn away most of the time that he was on screen. Like I could only hear it. I couldn't see it.
Was it his abusive nature, or what about him turned you off so much?
I think it was the fact that just every time he was there, it's like, I don't know if he's just going to straight up murder somebody for nothing. You know,
Right.
It's just, it is that abusive nature. That scene when he's given Isabel Rossellini the old Philadelphia fister, that was not pleasant.
Sorry. That's interesting. I think that makes him so much scarier as a person. Like you do get the feeling that he could just murder someone at any moment, but you also get the feeling that he's going to carry on torture as long as he fucking can.
Yep.
And it makes him a very scary individual.
Yeah. I think there's something that Lynch has said about Frank Booth that I think is really interesting. He said, Frank Booth to me is a guy Americans know very well. I'm sure everybody has met someone like Frank. They might not have shook his hand and gone out for a drink with him, but all you've got to do is exchange eye contact with someone like that, and you know you've met him. That just chills me to even read. Because it's true.
Yeah, I can agree with that, because like and next week's movie has interesting individual in various states of unwell brain bits, but you always knew, like, if I were to let's say that this was 1986, 9-year-old Jeff watching Blue Velvet would not have been unlikely, by the way, but I knew kids in 3rd grade that you could just look at them and just like, I mean, he's going to take the BB gun out back and shoot the stray cats that are just for fun.
Right.
You know, and it's like
dead eyes.
Exactly.
Yep.
You know, it's like you just see it in those people, and it's like you shrink from them a little bit, not because you're necessarily like, most of those people like that can be very easily physically overcome. Yeah, I mean, and that's partially why they are the way they are, but they'll get the drop on you first. And that's what you don't want to have happen. And that's why just seeing Dennis Hopper there, even though I have no doubt that Kyle MacLachlan could have beaten the shit out of him in a fucking fist fight, but just seeing him standing there in the hallway, you shrink from him a little.
He's imposing. Yeah, absolutely. McLaughlin said as much. He said, you know, working with Dennis Hopper in this film was pretty easy. I just reacted the way I would have normally reacted,
right?
Because he's so intense, and he brought so much, evil to that character. He just embodied it. It's an interesting thing because Dennis Hopper lobbied to play Frank Booth. He wasn't really even considered because of his reputation at that time in Hollywood. He was he had just, he'd been in rehab for years. He'd pretty much killed every connection, burned every bridge he had in Hollywood at that point. And he was trying to get back and on the comeback trail, and he essentially begged to be the role of Frank Booth, because Frank Booth or David Lynch had considered some other actors like Willem Dafoe and Harry Dean Stanton. Harry Dean Stanton turned it down, from what I understand. Said, I don't want to play somebody like that. I don't want to live in that role or something like that.
Interesting. To me, it seemed like, and maybe this is just because, as Jeff mentioned, our movie from next week, that this is the kind of role that would be written for Jack Nicholson, in a way.
Yeah, but you couldn't get him on a $4 million budget.
No, right. Definitely not.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Everybody worked for scale in this picture. So yeah, absolutely. So getting someone like Dennis Hopper, even with his reputation, is kind of a coup from a budget standpoint. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, and 1986 ended up being a huge year for Dennis Hopper. He made The River's Edge. He made Blue Velvet. He made Hoosiers. He was nominated for Academy Award that year. Kind of crazy. He really in 1 year reestablished himself as a heavyweight in Hollywood.
Right. Yeah.
And And he did it through kind of proving himself. He, by all accounts, was the most. He actually got upset with the other actors when they weren't, when they were goofing off. He was on set every day on time. Yeah, he was kind of like the general of the actors. It was kind of wild.
I don't ever want to have Dennis Hopper yelling at me for some reason.
No.
But he, there's an anecdote with him that I find funny. He, once David called him to tell him he had the role, or Dennis Hopper found it through his agent that he got the role, and he called David to thank him. And David was having lunch with Laura Dern, Kyle MacLachlan, and Isabella Rossellini, and he took the call and he came back. Dennis Hopper told David, he said, "Thank you so much for the opportunity. Just so you know, I am Frank Booth. Like, I've got this nailed."
Right.
And David Lynch was like, "Oh, that's great. That's great." And he went back to lunch and he said, "I just got off the phone with Dennis Hopper, and he told me that he is Frank Booth." And he said, "Well, that's great for the picture. I don't know how we're ever going to have lunch with him."
He's got a weird sense of humor, that David Lynch.
And he also said, I mentioned this when we were chatting earlier, but that he said working with Dennis Hopper was like sitting next to a ticking bomb. He said he just did not know, if there was going to be something that just ignited him. Yeah. And he's, sober. So he's, I always kind of got that impression from him in his performance in Hoosiers, that he was kind of a ticking bomb, because he sort of played a drunk in that, right? Who was trying to get sober, and it was always just one little shove away from binge drinking and falling back off the wagon. Yeah. Anyway, Dennis Hopper is amazing.
He seems so. He seems so cool in Easy Rider.
Oh, he was at the top of the world when that movie came out. Yeah.
Well, that was his first Oscar nomination for the script of Easy Rider. He and Peter Fonda shared that nomination. Yeah. So right, and speaking of that, and we'll talk a little bit more about what next week's movie is here in just a second. But that certainly, I mean, like, he is a major figure in counterculture film making because of Easy Rider. I mean, that was I think people don't really truly realize how really massive that movie was in terms of how it changed Hollywood for a decade. It brought to the forefront and it brought to the mainstream different ideas that hadn't really been looked at before, or really dealt with before. So, for him to, for the next 15 years, essentially kind of wash out. I mean, obviously, it probably went to his head a little bit too.
Yeah, there's a whole diatribe we could go down to with the last movie. The movie that bombed after Easy Rider and his descent into drug addiction, but yeah, I mean, he was crawling his way out of that when he made this movie. So I think before I know we've talked a lot about sort of the production at this point. I think it's important to kind of understand how to approach a David Lynch film for those that are listening. There's
Give
a couple
us the
things.
master class, Jason.
There's a couple things. There's a couple things here that I think are important. It's important to understand that David Lynch is a painter first. That is his true love. The only reason he got into making movies is because he wanted to make a painting move. He wanted to make a living, like, moving sculpture, right? And that's what he did with his first film, Three Men Getting Sick. It was kind of a moving painting sculpture. And that was a huge hit. And he was like, oh, there's more to this sort of visual medium. Another thing to understand is that David Lynch, and this is going to be hard to understand, I think, for some, but David Lynch, in my opinion, is the least pretentious filmmaker in the world. And the reason for this is that he doesn't like to assign meaning to his films. The things that he creates are built out of ideas that he assembles and things that he feels, right? And his whole goal is to make something that is greater than the sum of its parts, right? He wants to evoke emotion. He wants to evoke feeling. The ambiguous nature of some of his ideas they might mean something to him, but he doesn't want to name those things, because once he names it, once he talks about it, once he talks about what it is, he's taken that mystery away from you. Right. And in that sense, that's where I say he's the least pretentious filmmaker in the world, because he leaves his films open to whatever experience you assign to them, whatever you get out of them, and he's validating of all of those experiences. To me, that is so liberating as a critic, as a viewer. I just find that to be very refreshing. You're not going to ever hear an artist statement from David Lynch, right? And artist statements are about the most pretentious thing you could do with art.
Right.
Lastly, I want to read something that Isabella Rossellini said. David is always dealing with some sort of mystery in his work. He once said something that really helped me understand his work. He said, "In life, you don't know everything. You enter a room and people are sitting there and there's an atmosphere, and you immediately know if you have to be careful about what you say, or if you have to be loud or silent or subdued. You immediately know it. The thing you don't know is what's next. In life, we don't know where the story is going or where a conversation is going to go in the next minute. David's awareness of this is central to his films. He's very sensitive to the mystery that surrounds everything."
Well said.
Well said. And also, you were almost said that as sexily as I'm imagined she said.
But that brings up something interesting, and how I've always, as a young, not successful poet, always approached my work was, I don't want to tell you what I feel. I want you to feel what you feel. So people would often ask me back in the day, and again, these are just friends, not any critic or anything, would ask me, well, what does this mean? My answer would always be, well, what does it mean to you? You know, like, if you can take meaning out of this, then I've done my job. And I think David probably feels similarly.
Certainly.
But, yeah.
I mean, he refuses to this day to talk in any specific terms about Eraserhead. He's like, he's said, you know, it's the meaning of Eraserhead has changed for me. Right? So I could talk about that. I'm going to start, as the maker of this thing, I'm going to immediately start taking the mystery out of it for you. And it's not fair. That's not what this is.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I like it.
Do you, and now you had mentioned that, you know, David Lynch is the least pretentious, or one of the least pretentious artists, or what, you know, however you want to state that, in, you know, making movies. Would you say that, well, I've got two questions here about that. One, I, for some reason, kind of think of him in the same regard as somebody like John Waters. It's like, hey, I'm just going to make this thing, and either it means something to you or it doesn't. Yeah, you know, and just kind of, you know, it's like, hey, I did my thing. If you like it, fine. If you don't, whatever. You know, I'm not going to tell you why you should like it. And I kind of feel like they come from a very similar artistic space, whereas, I mean, I'm sure David Lynch doesn't have people actually literally eating shit in his movies, but but I feel like there's a thought process that's probably similar between the two of them.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I think you're probably right in some ways, but their intent might be a little different.
Sure.
In what they're trying to accomplish. I think a lot of John Waters, he's purposefully trying to subvert convention.
Well, he's poking the bear. He's always rocking the boat in some way, but it's not like he's.
I think maybe Lynch is just more subtle about it.
Maybe that's it.
Right.
But Yeah, but the other thing I was going to say, do you feel like that maybe the people who, and I'm asking you not because I'm going to accuse you of this, but I'm asking you this because you are in this sphere. Do you think that most people who are like big Lynch fans are probably the ones who are more pretentious?
Yes.
Just in general?
Yes. I can give you one great example. A painter and photographer called, his name is Gregory Crewston. And Susan and I were just talking about him because we quite like Gregory Crewston. We saw one of his exhibitions in New York City back when Susan graduated from NYU. And we really like what he does. He does really fascinating photographs of these strange moments in time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And usually in a suburban setting, very, very much influenced by Blue Velvet, the way it's lit, the way it's ambiguous. There's something not right here, right? In all of his pictures. He is a huge David Lynch fan, and he does not hide it. And the way he talks about his art, I would certainly call more pretentious. Yes. So that's one example. I most definitely agree. I also think that, interestingly, Lynch is copped a lot by just genre filmmaking. Like your least pretentious genre filmmakers, like this guy who I'm watching this movie Fried Berry that I need to write a review of. I mean, he's got several Lynch references in this movie, but he calls this movie a thing. He doesn't call it a film. And he's just making kind of this a thing. I wouldn't even call it a movie or a narrative. It has a narrative, but it's not definitely meant to be taken seriously at all. But there might be a pretension in that. I don't know.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think with any kind of creation, there's going to be some percentage of pretension. I mean,
yeah.
I only bring this up because before we recorded this, we spent an hour talking about behind the scenes business stuff. But it's like there's an ounce of pretension that I put into my dick and fart jokes on being
Sure.
I mean, it's because I already have to assume that you assholes reading it want to hear that, or want to read that, and then I'm the one who's providing it, or whatever.
There's something too about Lynch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead and finish your thought.
No. I was going to say, I mean, it's stupid, but it's still a level of, allow me to descend to tell you the dick and fart jokes, or something like that.
Right. There's something too about the things that David Lynch makes, and that he was able to make these movies. He just got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, he had a lot of opportunities along the line that he took advantage of, that he worked for. But, in a lot of ways, after Eraserhead, he could have easily been forgotten. But he got the opportunity with Elephant Man, and it fucking got nominated for everything, right? And from then on, he was kind of set. Dune was a huge financial failure. I mean, absolutely devastating. He could have never worked again on that, but his relationship with Dino allowed him to make Blue Velvet. And the Blue Velvet was a critical darling. It didn't make money, at least not initially, but the talent was obviously there, and it allowed him to then start to make things like bigger budget pictures like Wild at Heart, which really wasn't a huge success either. Twin Peaks really was his next big success, and it was a huge success for a very short flash in the pan. So he's just always been able to kind of get enough financial commercial success in each of his endeavors that has parlayed him into the next thing he wants to make, right? But none of these things could had to happen. And I don't think David even really is a person who wanted to force them into the world. He was just like, I have an opportunity to do this thing. I want to do this thing. And he's been able to make it. He's very lucky in that regard, and he'd be the first to admit it. I don't think he is under any illusions that the art that he's made had to be in the world, right?
Right.
But he was able to bring it into the world, and he's grateful for that.
I think, should we maybe get into the? I don't even want to say plot, because I don't think this movie is heavy on plot. It's heavy on character. And I have
Yes.
more to say about that later, because when we promote next week's movie, again, there's a lot of connections between this, but this whole month has been heavy on character, light on plot, I would say.
I would say that's correct.
But
and tone and atmosphere.
Yes.
Yes.
So the very first shot, I made a note of this. The very first shot, there's that red rose that's against the like crystal blue sky and a white picket fence. Right there, you have a photograph. I mean, that's an award-winning photograph by itself.
Yeah.
But
That's an image that you know, a painter, like his mind is like, this is a kernel of the idea right here.
Yes.
Right.
And it's red, white, and blue. It's Americana.
Yep.
So it's, you know, we're seeing that without going any further, I already know where this is taking place. It's suburbia, Americana, basically small town ideas. There's a guy who's watering his lawn. He has a stroke or an aneurysm? Stroke, right?
Something.
Seemed like a stroke to me.
Yeah. So he collapses, and we find out that that's the father of Kyle MacLachlan's character, Jeffrey.
Can I talk about that? Just this though. This the introduction in this movie is Lynch in a nutshell. You know, yes, you've established this place, really, not a time, but a place, with the shot of the picket fence. You're welcoming. It's very warm, right? Then you have something tragic that happens immediately. You have the guy has a heart attack or whatever, it collapses, and then there's an immediate moment of humor with the dog lapping up the water from the fire hose.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
I laugh at that every time I see it. It's funny. I mean, and that's again staged like a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And the dog lapping at the water faucet, and then
Because if that moment, I'm sorry, go ahead.
and then immediately after that, Lynch subverts that feeling and does that push in on the camera on the dog, and the music and the tone and the sound design all changes to go into something more sinister. And it slows down, the frame rate slows down, and you're just like, whoa, okay, you know, things are not right. And to further emphasize that, he takes it then into the grass, and it's a very literal metaphor that he's going to show you in this movie what's underneath everything. You know, this you know, the bugs and the
gross
worms and the gross and all that stuff that just exists right under the layer of your perceived and naive happiness or idyllic life, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's all told right there in the first freaking scene. It's beautiful.
It's a great build-up, even when the faucet head or wherever you turn it on starts leaking.
Because the hose is wrapped around a branch or something.
Yeah, so it brought me through like, oh, this is a nice simple town with a leak, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
something is strangling it.
Something is strangling it, but this guy is watering his lawn. He doesn't realize it at first. And even that moment with the dog eating out of the hose, if you froze that moment with the kid standing at the end of the driveway and the dog lapping out of the hose and the guy lying on the ground, you'd think, oh, this is fun. Yeah. But you wouldn't know this guy is almost dying. It's
almost like Norman Rockwell, right?
Yes. Very Norman Rockwell.
Yeah.
There's always multiple things happening in one larger image. Yeah. Right. So then Jeffrey comes to town because his father's in the hospital, and he's a bored guy. He walks everywhere at first, and it cracked me up. He goes up and he sees that shed, and he sees something he wants to throw a rock at.
Yep.
And he throws it poorly, like completely misses it. And then he has this look on his face like, oh, shucks. You know, and he just kind of walks off dejected, you know, and he's bored. I mean, everything he does in this movie is because he actually is looking for excitement. He's watched too many crime movies. And so he's, but anyway, so he sees his dad. when he's walking back, he's going to pick up that rock and try to hit that thing again. But he also finds an ear, a severed ear that's covered in bugs. Again, bugs always there. But he takes it to the cops, and it's like, yeah, that's an ear, all right.
Yeah,
There's
I love
something-
that.
There's
I
something
love that interaction. Yep, that's a human ear, all right.
that's hilarious. I was laughing at that. But there's something interesting about that scene too. Artfully, the camera, before he picks it up, it enters the ear,
Oh yeah,
and it never leaves. Like the camera doesn't come out anywhere
Right.
else until much later in the film.
It's like he's falling down the spiral of
Yes,
the
so
ear canal. Yeah.
almost everything else the rest of the movie is like inside your head.
Yep.
In a way, in a manner of speaking.
Yeah,
because the
Lynch
camera never-
definitely said that it had to be an ear because it had to be an opening into something, right? Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how much Lynch is willing to talk about this movie in terms of representation, because he's pretty much said there's no subtext in this movie. It's all right there.
Yeah,
Like the
it's all
metaphor
on
is
the
all
surface.
right there. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I think that also helps make Frank Booth that much more like,
Mhm.
it's like, oh God, you can't get rid of him now. He's always right there. Yeah, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, or you can't unexperience
Mhm.
his insanity until you kill it.
Right.
So then, so at this point, he's checking in with the police detective guy, but he can't just leave it alone. He can't just say, well, you know what, I reported it, I'm done. That's what I would probably do. I'd be like, oh, fuck off, I'm not getting involved anymore. That's not my job.
Right.
But so he goes over to the guy's house. He does have a pretty daughter, Laura Dern, who
Yes.
I had said to Jason, it's like, she is both really attractive and really not at the same time, and I think I really like that.
Yeah.
She's awkwardly radiant in this movie.
Well,
Absolutely.
she is the
She's a teenager in this movie. She's 18, 19
Oh,
years
wow.
old.
yeah. I mean, she's playing a high school kid.
Yeah, she's pretty much cast age appropriately in this movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, she
And
looks
she-
like the girl next door who gets a 4.0 GPA, but is just interesting enough that you might want to get to know her a little better.
exactly.
Which is like the polar opposite of Isabella Rossellini's character.
right, which is
in this
all
movie.
attraction, and
All sex appeal, 100%.
all desperate need
Well-
of saving.
Yeah, and his attraction to each one of them is different as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
Yeah.
and
Well,
the whole
he
movie is
treats
based... Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say is he treats Laura Dern at the beginning as his girl Friday more than anything. He wants to be the hero that saves the day and solves the mystery, but he needs his girl Friday to help him out with that.
Right.
And that's how he treats her at the beginning until he just finally realizes that, yeah, I really would rather just be with the girl next door than this person who's in this really shitty situation.
Right. There's a tug and pull between whether he's going to end up in the abusive underbelly of the world, or he's going to end up staying on the, whatever you want to call it, the normal side of life.
The blissfully ignorant.
Yeah, the blissfully ignorant. And
Yeah, Kyle MacLachlan is our conduit, right?
Yeah.
He's the audience. He's the bridge between two worlds, the naive and the end of innocence, right?
Well, yeah, because he's a college student. He's gone off, seen the world a little bit, and also, they cast the two women perfectly too, because you have Americana Sandy, who is, blonde and cutesy and just up for a good time.
dating a
then you
football
have-
player, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
Popular. And then you've got, the Isabella Rossellini, who is European and dark and comes from a darker place and has darker problems and is has a grown-up problem. Has a real big grown-up problem. And, so...
It's interesting that the casting of Isabella Rossellini, initially David Lynch wanted Helen Mirren for that role. and he was talking to Helen Mirren about it, and I don't think he was convincing her. And it just so happened that
Does anybody actually convince Helen Mirren, or does Helen Mirren convince everybody else?
I know. Helen Mirren is a stone cold fox even today. So she could convince me of whatever she wants. But he met Isabella Rossellini at a restaurant that was owned by Dino De Laurentiis. And she is probably friends with some of Dino's associates, work people. And they pushed their tables together, and they had a meeting, and David was talking to Isabella about the movie because Isabella had mentioned that she was just in a movie with Helen Mirren. And then David started to think, he's like, well, maybe I should see if she's interested. She looks the part. He had told Joanna Ray, his longtime casting director, that married to Aldo Ray that he wanted somebody with an imperfect body. They didn't want like the typical, bombshell body.
Yeah, that's one thing that I did find even that much more. Okay, so real quick to kind of tag along on that. As I've gotten older, my taste in women have gotten older too. And those imperfections become that much more attractive to me. And yeah, I mean, Isabella Rossellini, she's got hips and she's got a little bit of cottage cheese on the back of her legs, and it's like, this is more real and more sexually appealing to me today than it would have been 20 years ago when I would have probably most likely have seen this movie. It's one of those things where, that's something that is very, very, she is very appealing in this movie for being very normal.
And I think too, it wouldn't have worked with someone with just a perfect body. This is a woman who needs to be represented as someone who has been through trauma.
Yeah.
Right? And nobody through trauma is going to be able to maintain like the perfect personal trainer fit body, right? It's just not.
Right. If they're going to be skinny, they're going to be too skinny.
Somebody who's had a kid isn't going to have the perfect body, right? So it was very important.
Well, nobody. I mean, and on top of that, also, if you look at her apartment, I mean, that's not a great apartment either. It's certainly not in a great building in a great part of town.
Nope.
It's just on the outside of the good part of town. And it's so this is somebody she's
living a difficult life.
Exactly.
Yes.
And if she's going to be skinny, she would have been too skinny.
Right.
That's how that would have been played out, or in reality, that's how it would have been played out.
Speaking about how we get into her apartment in the first place, I find this all really interesting because up to this point in the film, it's very heavily shown bugs, lots of bugs, underground, ants in the ear, he's showing bugs a lot. And Jeffrey Beaumont gets this idea to get into her apartment as a bug man.
Yep.
Which, he's the exterminator, which is...
I don't know why that has never occurred to me, but that's never occurred to me.
Really?
Wow, Chuck, you nailed it.
It's so obvious, and I'd never, ever thought about it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Keep going.
No, he's quite literally the bug man.
Yeah.
In the film.
He's going to snuff it out.
Yep. And that scene is so great because he's so Sandy had given him the name of Isabella Rossellini and that she was being mentioned by her father a lot.
Right.
Because she can hear him talking through her floor. And he goes in there.
Because her bedroom's right over his office.
Yes. Yep. And she is immediately like scared looking, almost like who could be at my door? Like, you don't know what she's going through necessarily yet, but she has this real, like, almost terrified air about her when she opens the door, but when she goes in, she's completely ambivalent to what he's doing. I think he could have gotten away with what he wanted to without any distraction almost.
Probably. And
Right.
whatever he is way worse than what is usually knocking at her door, or way less worse.
Way less worse, yes.
Than
yes.
what is usually knocking at her
It's
door.
an inconvenience to her, so she just leans against the wall.
She has post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, when someone knocks at her door,
she jumps.
Yeah, there's something bad is on the other end of that door.
Yeah, it's either Frank or the Yellow Man, usually, is coming. So yeah, that whole scene is great, and Sandy is supposed to be the one who provides the distraction,
right?
But it turns out being the Yellow Man. We don't know who he is quite yet, but he is obviously.
We just know he wears a yellow jacket.
Yep, and he's obviously a menace to Isabella Rossellini's. Mrs. Valens' character,
Dorothy Valens.
Dorothy Valens, thank you. So. Kyle MacLachlan steals the keys. I always do this. Jeffrey Beaumont steals the keys and is like, "Oh, I'm in luck." And Sandy's like, "Yeah, if one of those keys opens the door."
You're right.
A little moment.
And also, she's really
in it.
Yeah, and she's also really good. The other thing that Sandy's really good at is saying, "Well, that's not going to help. Whatever you just did isn't going to help. It's circumstantial, or it's." You obtained it illegally. Like, she is the brains behind it all. He is just all action. Like, I'm gonna go break into this person's house.
She's fascinating though, because she is also us, because we are where Kyle MacLachlan is sort of our conduit to this world. She is also the audience, in the sense that we're the ones who are placing all these cautionary markers up. Where it's like, oh, I don't know if I would do that, and this is why. And she's very rational about everything, but she's also curious. Yeah, she is very, very much intrigued by this whole thing, and she's only half-heartedly trying to talk him out of these things.
Right. Well, I think you could almost see Jeffrey Beaumont, Dorothy, and Sandy as one character. I think we've talked about this recently, almost in the id, ego, and super ego sense. That I don't want to go too far into that, but those two girls represent the pull inside Kyle MacLachlan, or in Jeffrey Beaumont's character, throughout the entire film. And she is often trying to ground him in reality. Like, you shouldn't do this. Ego. This is stupid. Don't do this. Yeah.
Man, you guys are getting into it now, because you're right. You're talking about the shit that like graduate students write about with this movie. Getting into the Freudian aspects of the characters.
We've done 130 of these fucking episodes. We are graduate students at this point. We've gotten our fucking degree.
When people start talking about like the Freudian aspects of it, David Lynch just kind of says, "I don't know, maybe."
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Chuck, we've become pretentious.
Yes. But I wouldn't doubt that you need that for this film. You need those polar opposites to make this movie even a joy to watch.
Chuck, you're getting into you're tapping some of the vein where I was finding the stuff that I like the most about this is looking at these characters, looking at like their places in life, and that sheen, and that, I mean, I've got a whole list of anachronisms that we're going to talk about momentarily, but that's all part of it too, right? That's all part of the picture, and it's all part of bringing me in to say, okay, well, how do I feel about this, or what do I think when I see this? Isn't that what Lynch wants us to do? That's but maybe not talk to him about it.
It's exactly right. And he likes to talk about it, but he'll play coy about certain things, right?
He's the professor saying, "Well, is it?"
Right.
Right.
But
also, like, he doesn't necessarily go out of his way to put these Freudian elements into the movie.
It's natural. It's natural.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So he's like, I don't know how to talk about that, because it was just an idea that I had. Now, if that idea means something like that, then sure, then that's interesting. But it's not the reason I made them the way they are. You know what I mean?
Isn't that kind of like just living life? Sometimes you do a thing, and you don't know that you consciously did a thing. You subconsciously did a thing, and somebody else said, "Hey, did you do this because of this?"
He talks a lot about the way he makes films as catching ideas, right? Yeah. He's like, I had an idea, and Blue Velvet was constructed from a few different ideas. It was constructed from the song itself, specifically the Bobby Vinton version. it was constructed from the idea of someone finding an ear, right, and not knowing what that was or meant, what mystery that could be, and a few other elements, right? And it was really kind of like, all right, now where does this next thing I have fit, and does it fit? So he's just constantly putting different ideas together and seeing what works with what, until he starts to kind of figure out a narrative that works with the tone and the atmosphere of what he's trying to convey, right?
So, so it's roughly about this time when he gets back. He decides, okay, hey, Sandy, I'm coming back. Take me. They go to see Dorothy perform.
And which is so like, hey, David Lynch. This scene, like a lounge singer singing or being in a lounge, is so David Lynch.
Yeah,
it's like I felt most at home in those moments, almost.
Yeah, it's like the early version of the Roadhouse,
Yeah,
right. From Twin Peaks.
And
I should mention.
I thought you were talking about the Patrick Swayze movie. How do we always come back to Patrick Swayze?
Always Patrick Swayze. I should also mention kind of an iconic moment in the Lynchland. When Laura Dern is first appears, and she walks out of the darkness into the light.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very Lynch. That's a very Lynch
he
moment.
Uses shadows a lot, and a lot of stuff happening.
And later in the movie, Kyle MacLachlan moves out of the dark into the light, right? Yep. And you can assign meaning to that if you want, and I think there's meaning that can be assigned to that. But I once actually heard David Lynch speak in a Q&A, and somebody asked the question. In a lot of your films, it seems you have characters who are moving out of the darkness and into the light. And I was wondering if you could explain what that means to you. Like, what are you trying to convey? Why does that keep appearing as a motif in your films? And David Lynch answered, well, he thought about it. He said, well, really, it's just because I like the way it looks when a person walks out of the darkness and into the light.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a way of it's just a way of introducing people. I mean,
I don't know. I find that a bit coy for this film because Jeffrey Beaumont's character is constantly represented by a flickering candle, and Frank's character is constantly referenced as an electric light. So he's doing something with lighting here, even if he doesn't want us to know it.
But I think the initial idea was just I like the way this looks, and then other things started to fit with that thing.
Right? Does he usually work with the same cinematographer?
I don't believe so.
I was going to say, because that could be something where they're like, hey man, check out this cool thing I can do. Yeah, well, I like that. Let's just keep doing it.
He's worked several times with Freddie Frazier.
Okay.
He worked with Freddie Frazier on Straight Story, on Dune.
Freddie Francis.
Freddie Francis, thank you.
You're getting into the Hammer people. I know.
But no, he's never had a constant cinematographer. He's had editors that he's worked with. Obviously, Angelo Badalamenti. This was the first time he worked with him, and he worked with him in every film since.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I was just.
But David Lynch is so particular about the way each shot looks. He's kind of his own cinematographer. He just needs somebody to help him find the right lighting a lot of times. Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, like, he's they've gone back to Dorothy Valen's place so that he can rummage through her things a little bit, try to figure out what's going on. Sandy is supposed to honk her horn 4 times. This cracked me up. Honk her horn 4 times if Dorothy comes back so that he can hightail it out of there. And she does. And what's he doing? He's taking a leak.
Taking a whiz. Can't hear the horn.
He's taking a strong stream piss.
Yes, he is.
And he flushes those old-style toilets that are super loud. He can't hear shit. Then he washes his hands. So he misses all 4, and so then
there's a continuity of jokes here, though, because back at the Slow Club, he orders a ice cold Heineken, and they both get Heinekens. Actually, that part was in the deleted scenes, but they get they get Heineken's delivered to their table. He takes a drink. He's like, I love Heineken.
That's in the movie. That's in the movie.
No, that part's in the movie. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Him ordering it is not. Sorry.
Okay.
But he talks to Sandy, high school student. He's like, you like Heineken?
Yeah.
Like, I've never had Heineken. It's like, I love Heineken. It's the best. And it's like my dad likes Bud, and the way that Colin McLaughlin reacts and delivers the line, the king of beers.
Yep.
It's so great. It's like,
Yep.
can't compete with the king of beers.
Yeah. Well, but
It's just the one
what else
moment-
you can't compete with? Pabst Blue
Ribbon.
So later when he's taking the whiz, though, it kills me because he just says the words Heineken.
Yep.
Or too much Heineken, maybe, is what he says.
I think he just repeats, Heineken.
Heineken, yeah. Yeah.
So
But that's like the one moment when they order the beers that, unless they have fake IDs, that gives me some sense of when this movie is taking place, because she is quite
She's
obviously
18.
Yes, she's too young to order a beer in our time, or even in the 90s.
Yeah, the movie doesn't take place at any time.
I know.
It just doesn't.
But, yeah.
I've got my list of anachronisms. We'll get there. So then she comes home or Dorothy Valens comes home and Kyle MacLachlan, Jeffrey Beaumont has to hide in the closet. And at this point, we are with Jeffrey watching like the reality of what's going on.
We become a voyeur, right?
Yes. And this is terrifying. It's a little sexy, and it's but mostly terrifying. She's like crawling around on the floor. She's just like lost. And then she gets this phone call where what she is saying, and you can't hear what's on the other end, but what she's saying is very disjointed.
Makes no sense.
Right.
Zero
She
sense.
likes singing the Blue Velvet song.
I like to sing Blue Velvet.
You said almost as sexy.
As sexy.
She calls someone daddy and baby, and like it's just really weird.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
But then he gets found. There's a whole scene where, or there's a whole moment where like he makes a noise, then and then she's like she goes into the closet to get her robe, all of this, and it's like he has no real opportunity to get out, really. And she finds him, and this is a fucking nightmare at this point. Everything that happens for the rest of the scene is a fucking nightmare. She's got a knife. She tells him to strip down. She's like, well, what are you doing here? Why are you here? And he's like, I don't know.
I wanted to see you or something.
Yeah, and it's like, well, I guess he's at least like trying to sound like, well, he is a crazy person, but at least he's like trying to not say anything about murder or anything like that. So she cuts his face a little bit, just a little dot of blood.
He tries to withhold his last name. Yeah.
Yes. And so she takes his wallet. She has him stripped down. She then comes on to him. And just when you think that this is a porno movie scenario or a male fantasy, he is being completely and totally dominated by her.
What's interesting, yes, because this is the first time that she has had control in any situation in her life in what appears to be a long time. So she takes advantage of her control, and she starts to act like Frank in a way.
Little bit.
We don't know this yet, but that's what she's doing.
Right. And then Frank shows up.
Oh,
And
Frankie.
he's got to go back into the closet, and he has to watch Frank be Frank. And he comes in, every other word's fuck. He's huffing gas from an unseen canister.
And he looks like an insect, just to be clear
He does
here.
kind of a little bit. Yeah.
Looks like a bug while he's using that mask.
Yep.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
At
I'm
least
on board.
it occurred to me because of all the bug imagery. But
Sure. And he has Dorothy call him both daddy and baby from different at different points in the conversation.
Yeah, the phone call starts to make a little sense.
Right. He's like, don't fucking look at me. Every time she's looking at him, don't fucking look at me. He slaps her around. He throws her down on the ground. He cuts a part of her robe and keeps it. We see that again later. Mm-hmm. And then he fists her. And at this point, it's like, well, this is even worse than a nightmare. What's worse than a nightmare? A waking nightmare?
Right, Frank Booth.
Yeah. Frank Booth is worse than a nightmare. And then he just leaves. And then Dorothy goes back to the closet, pulls Jeffrey out, and then she wants him to basically, I don't know, like treat her. Semi-continue the interaction she was having with Frank. But also be a little bit more consenting about it.
Right.
She has a little bit of Stockholm syndrome in the sense that some of this has become a kink for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And this is the hard shit to watch. And the next morning...
Before we go to the next morning, can I ask a question?
Well, I was just going to say the summation of this whole night. In the next morning, Sandy asks, like, how did it go? And he's like, it went all right.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not all right.
He could not share that detail with her. He just could not.
I don't think he could process it.
Yeah.
But I watched it, and I'm like, well, this didn't go well.
So there's a weird scene, though, in the bathroom when she walks back before he leaves the apartment. He looks down, and it looks like there's denim or another kind of blue coming out of the it's a weird shot. Do either of you remember it? Mm-mm. It's like he notices something that's coming out from under her blue velvet robe.
Oh, are you sure? It's not just noticing that it's been cut?
Maybe that is what he's noticing, is just that it's been cut. I think he just
notices that the fabric's been cut.
Yeah, because at that point I thought there was something weird about her vagina or something, like she had magic.
Like he put something up,
she had like a literal blue velvet vagina or something. Like at that point I had like weird thoughts about what the hell was going on in there.
Chuck, you're dissecting movies now like I am, and I think you could seek help.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Steph was also confused about that shot.
No, I think he just realized that it was cut because later he goes back to see her perform and he sees Frank and he's sniffing sniffing that piece.
That makes sense. Thank you for clearing
I think there's even a quick moment. It's maybe easy to miss where he rips her dress.
Yeah,
it cuts a piece from it. You see him do that.
Yeah, because he wraps it around his hand as he's like holding on to her, or yeah. Or that is actually what I think uses to give the old Philadelphia fister there. Philly fister. So now so Jeffrey is now too deep into everything, but at the same time he's still relying a little bit on Sandy. We find out Sandy can't always be available for him because she has a boyfriend named Mike.
Yeah.
And Mike is a big old dumb guy. He has one of my favorite lines of the movie is spoken to Mike later in the third act.
Right, but isn't this the next part when Sandy and him get in the car and talk about the dream, right?
Yes.
Yes, Jason, I'm sure you want to touch on that.
This is kind of the famous scene where Kyle MacLachlan is really trying to process, what he's seeing. It represents his end of innocence truly, because he's exasperated and he asks out loud, "Why are there people in the world like Frank?" Right.
Why is there so much trouble in this world?
Yeah,
is exactly what he says.
And then why are there people in this world like Frank? He says that as well. Yes.
Yeah.
And Sandy, this is so David Lynch. Sandy balances that with the story about her dream that she had of the Robins, and that there's trouble until the Robins come. Robins represent love in her dream, and like you kind of pointed out as well, Chuck. The Robins eat the worms, right?
Yep.
there's this counterweight. And that's really a lot of the themes that David Lynch plays in, is this balance, this struggle, this tug of war between hope and despair, right?
Yeah.
It's all there. We live with it every day. And it's how much you can tip the scale on either side of that to living a meaningful life, right? Or living a happy life. It's kind of what honestly, in a nutshell, that scene is kind of what I love about David Lynch's films, is that he's constantly toying with that idea.
Well,
that darkness and light, that hope and despair, that idealism and that reality, right? And trying to find something in between that works.
Well, later on, I want to go ahead and skip forward to a moment right at the end. Little old Frances Bay, playing Aunt Barbara.
Oh, I love Frances Bay.
Sees a robin at the windowsill eating a bug, and she's like, "Ooh, I don't know if I could even eat a bug," which is that is the vast majority of the people in the world won't do something about something that's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a great deal of something. At the time that we're recording this, obviously, there are things where people are finally being moved into some sort of action to confront bad things.
Yeah, maybe there are more robins than we thought.
Right, but
hell, people won't even wear a goddamn mask.
Right.
Right.
I don't know if I could wear a mask, but she might as well have fucking said that.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. That's the point I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
It's like most people aren't willing
to
just do what's right.
Right.
To confront something bad. Now, the bad could be a person. The bad could be an idea. It could be an action. It could, whatever. But most people tend to feel safer when they don't confront that.
Yep.
And
well, I think more
and
people.
Jeffrey Beaumont is somebody who is willing to confront it.
Most people feel safer because the act of change, the act of shaking up even a bad status quo, is more frightening to them than the transition, or than the transition from what they are used to is more scary to them than what they are, the nightmare they're currently living. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
And what is that called, everybody? Think back a few weeks. What is that called? It's the undiscovered country.
Ah, yes.
Yes.
Fucking all goes back to Star Trek.
Yeah, it sure does. I actually use that term at work sometimes when I talk about change.
It all goes back to Star Trek?
No, the undiscovered country. Yeah. But that's what it means. I mean,
Bringing it back, Jeff.
Yeah, I know,
Good callback, buddy.
Anyway, so for anybody who listened to our Star Trek episodes, who decided to stick around, Blue Velvet is basically in Star Trek.
Yeah, basically.
So
next we have like the last normal scene probably in the entire movie before it goes completely off the rails. And I actually found this quite fun and very Twin Peaksy almost. Is when Jeffrey goes to Frank. Or wait, does he have the ride first before he goes to Frank's place? No, I think he goes to Frank's.
Well, no. His joyride with Frank comes before his date with Sandy, if that's what you're getting to.
No, I'm talking about when he goes and takes the pictures at Frank's place.
No, that's first. That's the next thing that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, he follows Frank around and he that's when he labels the yellow man.
Yeah. The well-dressed man.
His little camera that he uses in his car is hilarious.
David Lynch made that.
Did he really?
Yep.
I loved it. The
Lumberton sculpture, like carved out of wood and everything, that's behind him, and when he's talking on the phone, that's also was made by David Lynch.
That's awesome.
He's basically his own set designer, David Lynch.
Yeah. But yeah, Jeffrey goes on this little investigative mission to figure out exactly what Frank is up to. He sees the Yellow Man there, who we don't quite recognize who the Yellow Man is yet. And then we see the well-dressed man, which I don't fucking get the point of this character at all. Like zero idea why he's even in the movie.
But he's not. He's been in the movie the whole time, right? Isn't that just Frank in disguise?
Yeah.
It is, but why is Frank in disguise?
Because he's a weirdo. He's a fucking weirdo,
That's
man.
what I'm saying. I don't get the point of the well-dressed man. It's like
Well, he's
Frank
insane.
Frank goes into his office, and then he comes back out as the well-dressed man and meets
He
the
looks
guy
like
he
Harvey
just
Keitel.
left. Yeah.
This is the stuff that I don't even try to figure out.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's not.
I think it's just because Frank already likes the sexual role play of being daddy and baby. I think this is just he just likes being different people.
If you want the mystery taken away, I can take it away, or I can let you be, or I can let you and our audience be blissfully ignorant.
Let us be ignorant.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the whole theme of the movie of being. It's maybe better to be blissful.
I just didn't get it. I was like, I almost knew it was him right away. I'm like, I don't understand why he's hiding from the guy who already knows who he is. But that
maybe Frank Booth saw Live and Let Die, and he's like, that guy, that that Yaphet Kotto, he was on to something wearing disguises and shit.
Right. So next is when he goes back to Dorothy.
He goes back to Dorothy's. Yeah. This is
because he wants to help. He legitimately wants to help her, but there is a perversion there too.
He gets tugged. He gets tugged really hard in this scene.
He sure does.
What does Sandy say? I don't know if you're a detective or a pervert.
Yep. And he's like, you'll have to find out, or that's for me to know and you to find out.
Yeah.
Like, that's so hilariously dumb.
It's
like, hey, yeah, but it works, man. It works.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
She dumps Mike.
Yep.
So that's when Frank encounters Jeffrey. At the
first we have
before that,
go ahead.
Their encounter in the apartment is pretty important. It's when their sexual relationship kind of goes over a line that Jeffrey is not comfortable with.
Right.
Because she wants him to hurt her.
Right. He wants him to hurt her, and he does. He hits her, and very reluctantly, but he does. He does do it, and it's something that he has to confront about himself later. And it's interesting. You hit on it earlier, both of you, and I was awesome. It was so cool to hear you say it because she has agency with Jeffrey. She does not with Frank, but she has these same sort of sexual desires. Like she's submissive in both relationships, but with Jeffrey, she's submissive from a place of power.
Right.
And she's not with Frank. So it's speaking to sort of like this masochism that she finds sexually arousing, and how she got that way, it's hard to say. Probably from being abused. And yes, definitely a sense of Stockholm syndrome, right? Where she only finds value, and others only find value in her when she is being mistreated, right? But she's also kind of taking control of those desires when she's with Jeffrey. It's fascinating.
That is a good point because, like, it's like she could have very easily let Jeffrey get arrested for breaking into her place. But when she realizes that he gives a shit because she seems to be in trouble, then she's like, oh, get undressed. And, don't look at me. It does the exact same thing. Yeah. Don't speak to me. Don't look at me.
Yeah.
The same things that Frank just did to her. And, it's I wouldn't have gone back.
Yeah. I mean, right?
Yeah,
but he did, and he pays a price.
He sure does, because Frank shows up. He's like, hey, who's this fuck? And he's like, he's just the kid from the neighborhood.
If I were Jeffrey in that situation, I would have shit my fucking pants.
I would have had liquid in my boots.
Just dumped all my bowels.
I would have shit those pants, then gone home and changed, come back, shit those pants, go home and change again, and then just shit the underwear because I had to do my laundry now. and then I would have had to taken a shower where I would have continued to shit. So he's like, hey, let's go for a ride. And Jeffrey's like, no, sir. I will not go with go on a ride.
Would
What are you
rather
talking
not.
about? Let's go. This is those types
He
of people.
pulls a Willard there. He's like, I would rather not. Or not a Willard, a Bartleby.
Yeah.
So like Christopher Glover.
Oh God.
I'm devolving. Sorry.
He gets it's one of those situations. Again, we've all known these people where it's like I don't want to tell this person that I think they're a fucking maniac, and I don't want to be around them anymore because I don't want to receive a beating right now.
Right. I've been in this situation. It's uncomfortable.
I know you've been in this situation because I have a feeling we've been in the situation with the same people.
Probably.
Where we don't want to be around these fucking maniacs.
I was in this situation in Chicago with Adam and James. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So okay, but okay. So we're in the same sphere.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yep.
Like there's sometimes you're at the bar, you're having a good time until somebody shows up, and it's like we're all gonna get fucking arrested if I don't leave right now.
Right.
And I can't drive right now.
Right.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where it's like you don't want to tell the person right there to their face, I think you are a fucking menace to society.
Yeah.
Get the fuck away from me, because at that point you might get stabbed immediately.
Right.
Or you might get punched out. Or you might just, which would then lead to your arrest anyway, because now you're in a bar fight.
When Frank Booth or anyone like Frank Booth asks you do you want to go for a ride, the only answer they're going to accept is yes.
Yeah.
Right. That's the only answer they're going to accept. And you can try. The only way you can get out of this is by running, sneaking away somehow. Like Irish could buy that motherfucker, right? But he's stuck in a hallway with Frank and his goons. He's not getting away.
Right.
And I like the way Frank makes it Jeffrey Beaumont's ideas by saying, you don't want to do what? And he's like, go for a ride. He's like, that's a great idea. Let's go.
And these are the people that I'm talking about.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think all three of us know the same person I'm talking about. But anyway, a friend of a friend, if you know what I mean. So it's like the person I always had a fucking irrational reaction to whenever they were around. It's like, get the fuck away from me. Anyway, but I can't say that.
I'm right here, Jeff. Stop talking about me.
It's Jason, Chuck.
Yeah. Well, you've put up with a lot then.
Well, I can't. My door is right there, but I can't quite leave yet. You know where I'm going to be. Anyway.
The movie's about to go completely off the frickin' rails now.
Oh, yes, because then he gets thrown in the back of a Dodge Charger, which is a bitchin' car, and it's especially scary when the bad guy drives the Dodge Charger. Mm-hmm. And they're just going everywhere. And the first place they stop at is a whorehouse, Pussy Paradise.
Mm-hmm.
And Dean Stockwell's there.
Oh my God, Dean Stockwell in this movie.
Oh, we should also mention that some of Frank Booth's goons. We've got
Brad
Dourif. We've also have I have Jack Nance, who is in everything that Lynch makes, pretty much. Rest in peace, Jack Nance. He was a Eraserhead.
Yep.
And then, yes, they go into this. I think epitomizes what Isabella Rossellini was saying about the way David Lynch. I mean, this is a literal representation of David Lynch and how he approaches filmmaking. Is like they're actually walking into a room, and there's a tone there. It's a lot of weird shit. It's very Kubrickian. I mean, it's sort of like the fucking Overlook Hotel.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because any one of those women might have been a bear. I don't know.
Also,
they go to the worst whorehouse in any town ever.
Also, Dennis Hopper said he didn't know really what he was walking onto on the set either. He was like David had hired all of these rather large, obese women, and I had no idea. So I was kind of reacting to everything as well.
That's so funny because so here it's like, Jeffrey gets beat up a little bit. He gets roughed up a little bit by both Frank. I think one of his goons does a little bit, and Dean Stockwell.
He gets a good one in, yeah.
He gets a good one in too.
Dean Stockwell You're so fucking suave.
Dean Stockwell starts lip syncing a song,
Yes.
And then
In
it's off
Dreams
to,
by Roy Orbison.
by Roy Orbison. Yeah. And so Frank's like, well, that sounds good. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take that tape with us. And then they go back out onto the road again. They take one hooker with them. And they at this point,
well, we got to mention that this is where we realize where Dorothy's son is at.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Dorothy's son. So I don't know if we've mentioned it or not, but Dorothy's husband has been kidnapped. Her son has been kidnapped. Apparently it's because Dennis Hopper is taken to Dorothy Valens and has made him her concubine, basically, his kept woman, and is blackmailing her because he has kidnapped her husband and child, and it's heavily
and cut off his
implied.
ear.
Yeah, it's heavily implied that the ear that Kyle MacLachlan found, that Jeffrey found, was Dorothy's husband's ear.
Right. So then they head back out, and they kind of stop off at the old makeout point here, and like Frank is like kind of wanting to get some stuff off of Dorothy, and Jeffrey's just not having it, so he punches Frank. You don't do this shit ever. Nope. And so Frank and his goons pull Jeffrey out. Everybody gets out of the car except for Dorothy. The hooker's dancing on top of the car.
I wanted to punch her more than Frank in this scene. Her dance is so hilariously bad.
It's so great though. It's just she's just dancing on top of the car there while all this shit is happening. And Jeffrey gets beat up pretty good. Pretty good. And
fucking lucky you're alive.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this is one of those moments where you realize that Dennis Hopper doesn't really kill people. He just makes them his own.
He tortures
because he's trying to do the same thing to Jeffrey now.
Well, he talks about send him a love letter. You don't want to get a love letter from him. It's a bullet from his gun.
Yep. Whew.
Yeah. So at this point now, Jeffrey pretty much decides he has to get the police involved, even though Dorothy desperately doesn't want him to do that.
Before you go to that, there's an interesting scene, and it's just a small line from him when he's at the table with his mom and his aunt. And he said, "Don't worry about my face. I'm fine." And his aunt starts to say something, and he says, "Shut up, or you're going to get it."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I love you, Aunt Barbara, but you are going to get it.
So it's a moment where you're thinking, like, is he starting to drift to the bad side? Is he really willing to beat up his aunt if she doesn't shut up? He says it almost not playfully. You know what I mean?
But at the same time, I think you can think about that, but I didn't take it as that. I just take it as
I didn't totally take it that way either. And knowing now that I've seen the deleted scenes, him and his Aunt Barbara had a lot more banter that was cut. So I don't think David took it that way either. But again,
it seemed like they put it in there.
Take
for
it however
reason.
the hell you want to take it.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was left in, if that was what was left in,
well, it's a smash cut.
Then that has meaning. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So it was probably more than anything
than what was originally intended anyway. So yeah,
it was probably more than it was the editor saying this. We can play this as a comedic cut, or it can make people think.
Yeah.
And it just depends on how you take it yourself.
Cool, but
because that smash cut definitely is a comedic cut in my book, at least. But yeah, no, I don't invalidate. That does not invalidate what you saw in that either. So then, so at this point, it's like, hey, Sandy, we've got to do something here. And so I'm going to go and see your dad, and I'm going to tell him that Frank Booth is a very dangerous and scary man. And he goes to the police department, and he's about to walk into Sandy's dad's office, and who's sitting there?
The yellow man.
The yellow man. And he flips out. You can see, I can see the exact moment that Kyle MacLachlan literally pissed his pants.
Yep.
Because he just hides around the corner. Now he's trying to figure out, what the hell do I do?
Wait,
this guy is involved.
The police are involved in this operation.
Or somebody in the police is involved with this. So, this person is connected. So, so then he meets with Sandy's dad separately.
Detective John Williams at his house. Yeah.
Detective John Williams. He does really good music.
Yeah.
He then, and he's like, I'm not going to get you involved, Sandy. You know, it's like you can get in a lot of trouble for what you've helped me to do. I can take the responsibility. You really shouldn't. And you know, like, and Detective Williams was even like, you know, is my daughter involved with this? And he's like, no, sir. And he's like, well, she better not be, you know, that sort of thing. And, but it does boil to a point where it doesn't really matter if she was involved or not, because I mean, like if you think things have already gotten as crazy as they're going to get,
right.
It's even more crazy. But there's a drug deal and there's lots of drugs. The Yellow Man is taking drugs out of lockup at the police station and then giving it to Frank to sell.
And he's also killing other drug dealers and taking their drugs.
He's killing the competition and taking their inventory as well. So then so now we are in a situation where, okay, the police are going to take a look at this. Sandy and Jeffrey are going to go out on a date now. You know, it's like
surprisingly,
Mike. And they go to a party and they say that they love each other and everything is just swell.
Steph and I were both like, what? When she said she loved him, we're like, what? No way. They can't love each other already.
Susan said the same thing. But she's 17, you know?
But in a perfect little world that is in the good side of things is built like the 50s, yeah, this could very well happen.
There's some cool camera tricks in that scene too that I like. But like, it starts very uneasily, and when they kiss, it like steadies on them in a normal lighting. Yeah. So like things are normal, but we can press past that. I just thought the camera work in that scene was really cool.
Well, there is it's a light within a strange dark world.
Right.
You know. Yeah. It's so anyway. Then
so I think I want to just anecdotally mention here, because that scene where they are at the party and they dance. Is really important to Lynchland. This is the reason. This scene is a reason for.
I didn't expect for you to say Lynchland. I almost lost all my drink.
Lynchland. That's what it's called. It's Lynchland.
Okay.
Like you would call it the Marvelverse or whatever. It's
Lynchland. Sure. I cannot complain.
Yeah. So David wanted a very particular song for this scene. He wanted "Song to the Siren," which is a Tim Buckley cover performed by This Mortal Coil. This Mortal Coil was a band started by the creator of 4AD. They made they put out so many amazing kind of iconic records in the 80s and 90s. But that particular song, and This Mortal Coil was kind of a collective. It was a band that was pulling in other bands signed to 4AD to sing on different songs. It was very much like a revolving door of musicians, right? But this particular song, "Song to the Siren," was a cover of a Tim Buckley song sung by Elizabeth Fraser, who was the lead female vocalist in Cocteau Twins. And I always fuck that word, Cocteau.
Cocteau, right? That's how I pronounce it.
Yeah. But they wanted too much money. I don't know how much too much money was, but they couldn't afford it. They're like, we can't get the rights to the song. And David was like adamant. It's like, we have to have this song. It's the only song that fits. And his producer, what's his name? Fred Caruso, producer on Blue Velvet, said to him, was like, well, I know this guy in Jersey. His name is Angelo Badalamenti. And I think actually he'd already been working with Elizabeth Rossellini on getting the right phrasing and recording for her performance of Blue Velvet, because Fred Caruso said, hey, I think this guy Angelo can help Isabella. So they worked together and they got the actual recording together that they used for her performance of Blue Velvet, which, funny enough, Susan said, it's like, man, she's not a very good singer, and she's not. Mm-hmm. And Isabella Rossellini has in interviews acknowledged that. She's like, I'm not a singer. But I don't think that Dorothy Valens is much of a singer either. She's stuck in this small town. She's working at the Slow Club, in Lumberton. You're not going to be a great singer, right?
Nope.
Well,
He's
and
passable.
but the thing is, though, it's like when you are attracted to somebody physically, you don't really care how well.
Well,
they sing.
yeah. As far as Frank goes,
Frank
that's a
thinks
whole.
she's
That's
great,
a whole.
but
That's a whole different
other,
story. Yeah.
That's a whole other level.
So anyway, Angelo had already been working with Isabel, and then Fred Caruso said, "Well, hey, why don't you tell Angelo what you want and see if he can come up with something?" And David was incredulous. He's like, "What? He's going to do what?" He's like, "I need this very specific thing. Nothing else works. Like, what's Angelo going to do that's going to satisfy me?"
He's
right?
not pretentious at all.
Right, I know. But then,
What the fuck is this guy gonna do?
but he's just kind of incredulous at the suggestion because he doesn't know this guy. He's like, right, like he's just going to come up with something. He just doesn't believe in. He doesn't know Angelo Badalamenti's talents yet. So, but he does. He's like, he relents. He's like, okay, I'll talk to him. And when, like David Lynch does when he directs anyone, he kind of changes the words and the feelings of what he wants. And Angelo is just sitting on a piano, and he gets the keys and the music to Mysteries of Love. And then Angelo brings in Julie Cruz, who is kind of his ingenue, if you will. And they work up the lyrics that David wrote. And that was the other thing. Fred Cruz said, "You should write the lyrics." And David was like, "I'm not going to, what lyrics? I'm not a songwriter." But anyway, it all kind of comes together into Mysteries of Love, which David still isn't totally happy with. He wishes he had Song to the Siren, which he later used in Lost Highway. But he was happy enough. But what is important about this is this blossomed this relationship with Angelo Badalamenti, who scored all of his music. He's just as important to the tone and atmosphere of David Lynch's films as David is, in my opinion. He produced albums with Julie Cruz, and it unlocked David's kind of interest in writing music as well. So it added this complete and total new element to David's creativity in filmmaking and in just general art by the one thing of not being able to get that particular song for this scene.
Right.
It's just those kind of little things fascinate me. The spider web of creativity that comes from not being able to get what you want from another artist, right? It's the invention, right? So anyway, Lynch.
Just for your information, if you haven't seen it, Jason, there is a cut. Some people have done cuts of this Mortal Coil song to that scene. If you ever want to check it out,
I'm sure. Yeah, I bet it works.
Yeah. I don't know if they have it right where David Lynch would have wanted it. That's
right.
One.
I mean, it seems as though David Lynch has turned out to be a little bit more specific on his need.
Yeah.
Well, the man knows what he wants. That's the thing, though. He's like, I know exactly what I want that fits this feeling that I have. And I can understand the frustration where you can't get that thing. So you've got to try and figure out something else that works measurably well as well. Yeah.
So now
don't we come to the end now, right?
Pretty much, yeah. Because at this point they leave this party, and then Jeffrey thinks they're being chased by Frank. Turns out it's Mike, and he's like mad that he got his girl taken from him.
Right.
It's like, hey man,
he's a big tough dude.
He's a big tough dude, and Kyle MacLachlan is easy to punch.
Right.
As Frank has proven. So this is where. So Jeffrey rushes back home, or to Sandy's home, basically, or pretty close to it.
Yeah, pretty close.
And here's where my favorite line in the movie is.
I know what it is.
Yeah, me too.
I thought you were going to kill him, man. Because so they stop and they're like, they're going to like rough him up or whatever. And Isabella Rossellini's just naked as a jaybird there on the step there. Mm-hmm. He's like, who's
covered
this,
in blood?
Mom? Yeah, covered in blood, and who knows what's going on there. It's like, hey, is that your mom? Is that your mom? And
I love how apologetic Mike gets, though.
Yeah, he's like, my bullshit is so small compared to whatever you're dealing with right now.
Yep. Right, and then as he's headed back to his car, it's like, hey, man, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then his buddy's like, I thought you were going to kill him, man.
I thought you were going to kill him, man. This is another moment that is kind of like this weirdly pivotal sort of moment in David Lynch's career is when he and his brother were children. He has this memory, one of his earliest memories of of walking home with his brother and this woman walking naked down the street. And it was sort of one of those first moments where he registered that something wasn't quite right in the world, and there was definitely something not right with her. He's like, it wasn't like a sexual awakening, it wasn't anything like that. It was an intense feeling that something is wrong,
Yeah,
right?
she got a little beat up or something, or
Yeah. And so obviously then, he put that, I mean, that was clearly a recreation of that feeling that he had with Dorothy in that scene. Yeah.
So Jeffrey and Sandy help Dorothy. We don't ever really know why she is this way, right? Like,
No, she's
No.
extremely strange in this scene because she keeps saying he gave me his disease, or I have his disease in me.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's saying really weird shit, like she's been drugged, which
Yeah.
I never really got the impression of, like, through most of this movie, but she's, like, at the end of her rope, obviously.
right. She's either, like, been beaten up, or she's been drugged, or she's drunk, or so. She definitely has blood all over her, but she doesn't seem to have any open wounds.
Right.
So she's just kind of like just naked. And they take her into Sandy's house, and also for her being there, that's bizarre.
Like how she got to Sandy's house and not Jeffrey's house or something. I don't know. Yeah,
right. Or whatever. And so she then, she gets covered up.
Calls Jeffrey her secret lover.
Yeah, she's like babbling stuff, and then she looks kind of coyly at the two, Sandy and her mom, and she's like, "He's my secret lover."
Yeah, like he's mine. He's mine.
Yeah, but and look, he's here protecting me.
But she has no idea that Sandy and Jeffrey have a relationship either. At least that we're aware of.
Right, and at the very least, she is just saying, "Isn't he sweet? He's my secret lover, and he's protecting me." And I took that as couple things, because then Sandy freaks out about that, and I can understand that, but and she keeps saying, you lied to me, but now maybe there's deleted scenes that says otherwise, and Jason, you can say for sure, but she doesn't know that. I mean, like, whatever he did with Dorothy Valens was before he and Sandy became a couple.
Right, she had a boyfriend. She shouldn't be able to talk shit like that.
Yeah, but I think it's a how are you carrying on this relationship with this woman and then telling me you love me, right?
Yeah,
I think it's maybe a betrayal in that sense, right?
I think that ultimately the right conclusion to Jeffrey and Sandy happens. Because at the same time, it's like, I mean, and I can definitely say that certainly they are at one high, and then all of a sudden the reality strikes them, and it's like running into a brick wall.
I mean, when Dorothy says that Jeffrey put a disease in me, and she says that a couple times in this scene. The second time, I think, last time she says it, Laura Dern's reaction is just agonizing. Like she is heartbroken. Her innocence is now shattered. Yeah. She's been confronted with, she's gone, like you said, from this beautiful moment to this absolutely chaotic scene within a matter of an hour, right? And she's reeling from that. Yeah.
But I don't know about you guys, but I mean, in almost every relationship I've ever been in, that's kind of
goes exactly like that.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I just did the coolest thing, and oh shit, reality just set in.
Oh fuck.
Yeah. Oh fuck, there's a naked lady at my front door. But anyway, so okay, at this point now, it's like, well, the shit's hit the fan. It's time to go kill Frank, basically, or get Frank. And so Sandy's dad is involved. Of course, now he also knows that the yellow man, as Jeffrey reported, is his partner.
Yeah.
Which, So, so basically what ends up happening is that Jeffrey goes to Dorothy's apartment where he finds Dorothy's husband dead. He's also missing an ear.
Yep.
And the yellow man is just kind of standing there.
Zombie Tom, as Steph and I were calling him.
Zombie Tom has had some incredible brain damage done to him.
It is so creepy.
Mm-hmm.
And because at one point his radio goes off and he just jerks his arm and knocks over a lamp.
Yep.
Apparently from getting a TV to the head is what it looks like happened.
Okay. So he's concussed, but also has he's also shot too, though, right?
He has brain matter coming out of his head.
That's it. There we go.
Yeah.
So his head's been completely smashed.
Dorothy's husband has been shot. You see the bullet hole in his forehead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. So then, but then Jeffrey realizes that, oh shit, Frank has a police radio because of the yellow man.
This is actually really clever. I love this scene.
Yeah,
I love this whole part of the movie.
Right. So he figures out he's going to set a trap for Frank. He radios Sandy's dad and says, hey, I'm at Dorothy Vallen's apartment. I'm in the back bedroom. Please hurry. And, and then
the well-dressed man is coming. Well, Frank
the well-dressed man is coming. The well-dressed man, you could have, like I said, it looks like Harvey Keitel. Could have fooled me. But it's Frank. And Frank's like, hey, you fuck. I know, I know what's going on.
You stupid fuck.
You fuck. I'll fuck anything that moves.
Fuck.
Anyway, so he's like, I know where you're at, you dumb fuck. You're real smooth, aren't you? Aren't you?
Fuck.
You fuck.
Sorry.
Then he goes into the bedroom, starts finding, and he realizes he's not there. It's like, oh, where are you hiding at, you fuck?
Yeah.
Well, Jeffrey's hiding in the closet. He's back in the closet, and Frank starts to put two and two together that he's probably in the. But he doesn't he shoot the yellow man
TV.
too?
He shoots the TV, then the yellow man, then goes to the closet. Yeah.
Then goes to the closet, to which he opens up the closet, and Jeffrey's grabbed the yellow man's revolver. It's like a fucking Magnum too, or something.
It's a 6-shooter, buddy. It's a big gun.
And he has pretty good aim. Not when throwing rocks, but when shooting a gun.
Yep.
He blows Frank's head into pieces.
Right.
At least the back part of his head is in pieces now. And Sandy and her dad show up, and everything seems to be okay. Cut to sometime in the future, and Jeffrey now seems to be kind of like his dad, just kind of chilling in the backyard. Like a guy in the 50s would, where his lady is making him lunch. And they go inside, and that's when Aunt Barbara and Sandy see the robin. And things are okay because the robin's eating bugs.
Yep.
Right.
And the end.
Actually, there's something interesting here about the end past that, because they do kind of go back through the opening shot of the film a little bit. They show the roses against the backdrop of the fence, but some of the roses are looking wilted. Like the town is taking a hit with this kind of shit that's going on. And then they show the yellow, and then they go back to the firemen going down in the same exact shot, waving like everything is okay, but it still gave me an uneasy feeling.
Yeah.
Like maybe this thing is lost. Yeah, innocence is lost. This thing has been dealt with, but the underbelly is still there.
Well, yeah, I mean, this thing here right now has been dealt with, but it's never going to be exterminated.
Right. The bug man killed one bug. Yeah.
He killed one bug, much like that stuff that I think he was just spraying water in Dorothy's apartment earlier. Because all he had was the rig. He didn't have he didn't have the actual, and she's like, oh, it's going to stink. It's like, it's a different thing.
This is new stuff. New stuff.
It's water. Yeah. It doesn't stink. So anyway, yeah, so let me kind of get, okay. I got a couple things here. I talked about the hooker just dancing on top of that car. Okay. Anachronisms. Here we go. Early on, I was realizing it's like there's an awful lot of mid-'80s cars rolling around this '50s town. And then I realized, like, wait, Frank's driving a late '60s Charger. Brad Dourif is wearing a silver suit like somebody potentially from the '70s.
Yep.
Maybe. There's a tape player. That's an '80s thing. The boombox that Dean Stockwell has. Or not a boombox, but it's a portable tape player. Sandy's friends, all their clothes and hair are not the same as hers. She does look like she's from the late 50s and early 60s, but they look like they're from the 70s or 80s.
Right.
Well, she's got the Angola sweater on.
Angora?
Well.
Angola is a country in Africa.
Yeah,
She's wearing an African
she's wearing a
sweater.
country. Yeah. It's just got the country on the front.
Yeah.
It's a graphic tee.
I see a country in your sweater. Sorry.
And then Kyle MacLachlan has an earring through the whole movie.
Which is really terrible when they shoot from behind him. It looks really weird.
Yeah. So,
Sorry.
Yeah, obviously I was like struggling at first. I'm like, why are you doing this to me, David Lynch? But then I realized it's not really about time. It's about place. It's about setting. It's about the idea of feeling comfortable. So that ties into what I was going to get at as far as how this month kind of turned into sort of a bullshit like theme month here. With The Prestige, we had depravity in terms of like revenge and stuff like that, with a Victorian gentleman's sheen to it a little bit, where it seems like it's the gentlemanly thing to do to best my
Turnabout
opponent.
Turnabout is fair play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Boys in the Hood are desperate people struggling against a bad situation. Again, not really a plot there, just groups of people and how they deal with the situation. Blue Velvet is depravity kind of seeping into normal Americana. It's the idea that this town is going to be advertised as a safe, lovely little town to live in, but it's got an infestation to it. And there, again, you got the bugs and stuff like that.
The Boys in the Hood and Blue Velvet are both neighborhood movies.
Exactly.
They're very much about a culture.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. Those two movies taken in juxtaposition is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that, obviously Blue Velvet is a very white person movie with white people problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
And suburbia and all of that. And a lot of people have written and made art around the insidiousness that lies underneath the sheen of suburbia. Yeah.
Pretty much everything in the 90s was that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Every white person movie in the 90s was about the insidiousness of the.
And it really goes back to the
suburbs.
50s, the time that Donald Trump would say was great was just all a bunch of bullshit. It's all presented as this great, beautiful, more moral time and place, but all the same shit, and a lot more insidious stuff was happening that is only even now coming to light.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is purposeful, but all the anachronisms, whatever.
Anachronism?
Anachronisms.
What the fuck is wrong with you guys?
I'm wearing my Angola sweater, Chad.
Chad, I get it.
I had to better myself there.
It used to be called the Congo.
Yeah, all of those things being out of time just make you feel like these issues are timeless.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter where and when you are.
Exactly.
These issues can occur whenever and wherever.
So next week we are going to be tying that together, where we have a movie about normal America snuffing out perceived depravity.
Right.
In the form of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So we kind of somehow figured out a way to connect each of the movies that we're talking about in August
Good job.
Yeah.
We did. And they're all connected to one another. They're all problems, I would say, that still persist today.
They all star Brad Dourif.
Yeah, Brad Dourif.
Look
Brad
for him in
Dourif,
the Prestige and Boys of the Hood. He's there. He's there.
Brad Dourif played Cuba Gooding Jr., and he also played Hugh Jackman. The guy is amazing.
Brad Dourif as Tesla would have been inspired, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or even as his underling.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Or what if he was Edison, but he was cut out?
Oh, that would have been good. Release
but he's still playing
Edison
Cuba Gooding Jr.
Release the Edison cut.
So anyway, no, I just find it interesting. Yeah, Chuck, you're right. These are timeless issues because as we kind of proved over these movies that we're dealing with, it's like all of these things, because you could also say Prestige is male fragility, right?
Right.
And do we need to say anything more about Boys in the Hood and the problem that still persists there?
Right.
Blue Velvet is we live in the suburbs. We're untouched by these problems.
Mm-hmm.
And Cuckoo's Nest, it's like, I'm sure I have lots to say about that next week.
Yeah, let's see. Let's see what you have to say
I'm
about
curious to hear what you have to say.
What do you guys know that I think One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is the best movie ever made?
I did not
know that.
But I can see why.
It is numero uno on Jeff's list of best movies ever made.
Wow.
Care to venture a guess what number 2 is?
I don't know. Maybe we should hang that as a dangling item for.
As a dangling participle?
Yeah,
I was going to say that, and then I stopped. But let's find out next week what number 2 is.
Dangling Chad.
Yeah, dangling Chad.
Well, I have a feeling at some point.
That joke.
I have a feeling at some point that you feel Egypt. Oh my God! I have a feeling at some point we're going to cover number 3 on my list too, because I think that's still prevalent, even though it's a 50-year-old movie. Anyway, so what's left here with Blue Velvet? We've gone. This is a supersized episode again. We're killing it, guys. We're making our listeners fucking pay. Not with money, but with their fucking time.
With their ears.
Fucking time.
Their ears.
We're cutting off their ears.
Something that's left for me, I guess. I had mentioned early on that the camera goes into the ear of the cut off ear in the very beginning of the movie. And once everything's resolved, it comes back out of Kyle MacLachlan's ear, or Jeffrey's ear, when he's laying in his backyard. Yeah. So I think as bookends of ear and canal entry and canal exit, those are cool film work, I will say. If not deeper, probably deeper than that in some ways.
Well, but David Lynch will not satisfy your answer.
No, he won't. It was just,
and I don't think there is an answer, but I think it's probably it's very cool. It's intentional. And it's,
no shot in the movie is accidental. Let's put it that way. No, I mean, accidental shit happens, but every shot is set up. They didn't accidentally. Oh, oops! We accidentally focused on Kyle MacLachlan's ear and pulled out of it.
Yeah, how did we do that? There was actually a cool accident in this film too. Not to drag this or belabor it too long, but when Rossellini goes to the door for Frank, she puts the knife on the heater, and it falls down. They post-add the noise of it falling off the heater, and she looks at it like, "Oh shit, I fucked up."
Yeah,
but they leave it in the movie. I thought that. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I don't have anything. Jason, you're the scholar of this.
I'm good. I think I've said my piece.
Thanks for bringing that movie to us. I enjoyed watching it.
You're welcome.
I didn't enjoy watching it, but I liked the movie. Let's put it that way.
I can hear that. That as well.
Certainly. Absolutely. I think that
there were some really, 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 like, I really liked every scene with Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern. They are adorable in this movie together. But I mean, anytime anytime Dennis Hopper showed up, I was uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Very
I think that was part of the reaction that audiences had around this movie. Was it was uncomfortable to watch. It became controversial. This was even the critics were split to some degree, although it was more on the side of positive than negative with the critics. But yeah, I mean, it was a polarizing movie. Dino De Laurentiis, he had gotten some buzz from one of his people who was trying to sell the film, and they said people are loving this movie. Dino, I think we might have something bigger here. So they screened it at kind of like a suburban theater, right, where kind of play the big mainstream movies, and the comments were some of the worst they've ever gotten on a movie. Like Dino De Laurentiis called David Lynch in his office, and he said, "This is probably the worst screening I've ever run for a movie," based on the comments. I mean, stuff like the filmmaker should be killed kind of comments, right?
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
So it was an early internet message board.
So Dino, his response was, "You know what? Doesn't matter. Fuck them. The critics are gonna love it, and now we know that it's not a movie for everyone. So we know how to market it." It's like, the guy was a genius.
It is regarded very well.
Oh yeah,
with critic. I mean, it's top movie of that 20 years. It's up there.
It was among the 400 nominated for the AFI 100.
There you go.
Movies. And Frank Booth is 36
in the
villains list. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
So,
very well regarded. This movie has aged extremely well as well. I would say, because of the timeless aspect of it.
Yep.
Hey, might I add something real quick?
Sure.
Next week's villain is number 5 on the villains list.
Oh, it's a good one.
She doesn't. She's got you not knowing if you're coming or going.
That type of villain is the most infuriating.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there is a specific moment that you can mark when that villainy begins. Yep.
All right.
So, next week, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. The Jeff F. I's #1 movie of all time.
Jeff F.
I like it.
I like it too.
So, and you guys like the movie too. I know you guys.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, Jason, where's the stuff's at?
Stuff's at filmseizure.com. That's where home base. It gets you everywhere you need to go. All the content's there, but you can subscribe to us in various places. You can subscribe to us on Spotify, on TuneIn, on iTunes, on YouTube.
Google Play.
We have a channel there. Google Play.
Stitcher.
Stitcher, SoundCloud. Yep.
Hmm.
So lots of different places. If that's your sort of home base for podcasts, that's fine. We're there. We also on Mondays. What do you do on Mondays, Jeff?
Monster Mondays.
Yes, Monster Mondays. Catch a new episode of Jeff talking about 3 things he loves about a monster movie. Super cool stuff. Very
what
positive.
We got coming up here? Ooh, The Keep.
Ooh,
The Keep is coming up.
Michael Mann's The Keep.
Michael Mann's. He will not talk about it, but
that is a fascinating story. The Keep. Yeah.
Yes. I talk a little bit. I dive into it a little bit.
Good. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a kind of a holy grail kind of movie for collectors also. Cool. I'll be checking that out. And then Wednesdays are new episodes.
Like I got it. My leg is bothering me. My movie's stuck in my boot.
Nailed it.
So Wednesdays, new episodes of Film Seizure. Mondays, Monster Mondays. Friday, we've got Jeff graces us with a stream of consciousness write-up of a movie that
I descend from the clouds to
that
provide
made him
you
a little crazy. Yep.
Yeah.
From B Movie Enema, and then we're still kicking with the 00 Saturdays.
00 Saturdays is still going. I'm going to assume at the time that we record this, I think it's been pretty well stated that No Time to Die is moving to 2021. So a little bit of a change when we get to December, but that we will do some countdowns, some extra countdowns.
Jeff will call a 00 audible.
Double O audible. An auto double O.
Sure. But yeah, that's all the news that's fit to print. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Film Seizure.
Yes, until next week, I am Jeff Arbuckle.
I'm Chuck Moore.
I am Jason Oliver, and you have been listening to Film Seizure.